Welcome to Discover Health, a White Mountain perspective. I'm your host, Dr. Tom Barella. And today's program, just like many in the past, are related to issues that we have that are special to those of us that live in the White Mountains. Today's program, we're going to take a look at families and families stressed and perhaps dealing with early childhood and newborns. And to do this, we have a special guest today, Ms. Dyan Roosma. I have to pronounce the Dutch correctly, as she reminds me. She has a master's in education and is the program specialist for Healthy Families Arizona through Northland Therapy. And I say good morning and thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate being here, and I'm sorry for butchering your name a little bit. However, I have to admit I'm not well versed in the Dutch pronunciations. That aside, your program has been around a while, and so let's get started right away and give us a little bit background about Healthy Families Arizona.
Sure. Healthy Families has been in Arizona since 1991, and it hasn't been on the mountain until October. It's the first time that it's been available here, so it's very exciting. It's new to the area. It is a free program, so families do not have to pay for it, which makes it very accessible.
Free is always nice.
Free is always nice. Yes, and we are here to strengthen families and to prevent child abuse, which is a very important piece, and to promote attachment and bonding and parent-child interaction, and to help families learn about child development.
And that really is all related to giving families a good start for their children.
Yes, we want to be able to teach families how to play with their babies, how to enjoy their babies, how prenatally they can enjoy teaching their child about brain development, even prenatally when they're in the womb.
That seems to be an important piece, is identifying the potentials for the stressors, I guess, of being a new parent can sometimes start even before they have the baby.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes people aren't ready to be parents. Sometimes people weren't prepared to have a baby. Sometimes they were prepared to have a baby, but it's still a stressful time to welcome a newborn into a home.
Yeah, although I've never been a woman, I would think that could be very, very stressful to know that you're going to be responsible for this bundle of joy that's going to come out in a few months down the way.
Absolutely, and morning sickness and all of the things that go along with that can be stressful, especially when you're trying to hold down a job and those kinds of things as well.
All right, so let's start right at the basics. Who's eligible for your program?
We work with at-risk families, and we work with, so at-risk means families that have poverty. Maybe the parents are struggling with mental illness. Maybe the parents are just struggling, maybe just social isolation. Maybe they just moved to the area and they don't have a support system. Maybe they're a teen mom or a young mom, single parents, those kind of issues that maybe they're struggling with, and they don't have the support system that they need.
All right, so essentially almost anybody.
Yes, it's not hard to qualify to be an at-risk
It's not hard
family.
to qualify. And can you live anywhere, or do you have to live at a reasonable?
We service a 50-mile radius of Show Low.
So into Apache County also?
Into Apache County. So Heber, Overguard, Snowflake, Taylor, Vernon.
Springerville, Eager.
We don't go quite to Springerville. It's a little bit past the 50 miles, barely past the 50 miles, but
I suspect
it's
if somebody wanted there, you'd probably find a way to try to do it. Okay, so essentially anybody in our region that feels the need, and so what kind of services do you actually provide?
We provide parent-child interaction. We really want to get attachment and bonding going as much as we can. We provide links to community resources, which is really important. If they're not hooked up with WIC, if they're not hooked up with Access and they're eligible, if they are looking for employment and they just can't find a job, we can help link them up with vocational rehab. We can link them up with, if they just can't pay their electric bill, we can link them up with maybe NAGOG, Northern Arizona Council of Government, to help get them started with something like that. We want to link them up. We can maybe help with a library group if they need a mommy and me kind of program. Parenting classes, we can help them with maybe getting Living Hope to help with parenting classes that they can be a part of.
So you're a repository for all the services that are available on the mountain.
Absolutely. We refer. We really want to help parents to be part of the community.
So essentially you're one-stop shopping.
Absolutely.
One-stop shopping. So you're a valuable person to know.
Yes. And my family support specialists, who are the home visitors that go into the home, they are valuable people to know as well.
So how do people get into your services?
Well, they can go into their obstetrician, they can go into their pediatrician, they can, when they go into Living Hope, to maybe get a pregnancy test, when they go to WIC, they can get referrals into our program.
So essentially all of the entry points that are common for families, pediatricians, family practitioners, obstetricians. The county health department also has a wellness program, and WIC is also another program. All of those could refer to you,
right? Because
if they refer to you, you have all the resources at your fingertip.
Right, and they can actually just call me directly as well, or text me, or email me.
And I know your number will appear at the end of this. So basically, your program is quite comprehensive. You can do developmental screenings.
We can do developmental screenings.
And I know that Northland Therapy for years has been involved with developmental assessments and referrals for early childhood through the AZIP program that they are part of. And I guess you are part of it now. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about how you actually do what you do, which I noticed in the materials you sent me was related to a Cheers program.
Yes.
It seems to be a real happy program.
It is. We have what's called Cheers, and that's an acronym. And the C stands for cues. So what we do is we look for parents and babies' cues. Are parents picking up on the cues the baby's giving? Is the baby's hunger cues, the baby's holding cues, the baby needs their diaper changed, those kinds of things. Can the parent tell when their baby needs those things? And so we look for that. And if the parent isn't picking up on that, then we can help support the parent to say the baby's rooting. So that's a hunger cue, and show them what that means. And then encourage them when they are picking up on that. Say, hey, great job, you're picking up on that hunger cue, and watch for that to make sure that's happening. Another thing we look for, the H in Cheers.
Let's stop there just a second, because what you're talking about for cues is an incredibly, incredibly important part of parenting. And is probably, in at least my role as a pediatrician, one of the most difficult things to discuss with parents, because the child's existence, starting at birth, is the difficulty in communicating their entire needs.
Right.
Food, warmth, comfort, diaper change, uncomfortability, all of those things, and how comfortable they're sleeping. All of those cues have to be transmitted to a parent. And I can tell as a pediatrician that many times that was the primary thing that I had to deal with, is how to recognize those cues. And frequently, from a doctor's standpoint, we don't necessarily have the time for all of this education. So to have a resource such as you, who can sit down with parents and talk to them about how to read their child's cues, helps the frustration of being a new parent, helps prevent child abuse, because a lot of child abuse issues are related to parents' frustration with their children crying.
Right.
And crying is one of the primary ways that children communicate their needs. Because remember, your child is fully dependent upon their parents for everything.
Absolutely.
So let's go on to the H. Sorry, I had to regress
That's okay.
there because that is such an important part of early parenting.
Yes, it is. And we can be in the home weekly helping them to pick up on those cues.
Oh, good point, that you'll go into the home weekly.
Yes.
So let's go on to the H now. Sorry for the
Absolutely.
regression, but that's really an important issue.
So H is holding. We want to look at the way the parent is holding the baby. Are they holding the baby in a way where they're able to make eye contact with the baby? Are they holding the baby in a way where the baby's comfortable, where they're supporting the baby's head? How are they holding their baby? Because we want to make sure that the baby is safe. And looking at that piece of it. And as the baby gets older, how are they holding the baby to be able to keep that relationship going?
I think the cuddling factor.
Yes.
Whether they're
factor.
cuddling the baby. Okay.
Yes.
And I think that that's important too, because your child needs to get a feeling of comfort in your arms, that when things aren't going right, there's always mom's or dad's arms that they feel comfortable in.
Yes.
A very good point.
Yes.
Okay.
So the first E in cheers stands for empathy. Are the parents being empathetic? So we can stay with the family until the baby is 5 years old. So baby's 2 years old, they fall down, they bump their knee. Is the parent saying, suck it up? Or is the parent saying, oh, I know that hurts. Give them a little hug, send them on their way. Is there empathy between the parent and the child? What does that look like? How is that going on? How is that relationship developing?
Is that tough to develop? I mean, to me, it seems like it's an innate part of looking at this wonderful little bundle of joy.
Well, it really depends on the parent.
Good point.
It depends on how they were raised, and depends on a lot of different factors. Depends on the frustration of the love, what's going on that day. How many times have they fallen and bumped their knee that day? It depends on a lot of different factors.
And probably a lot about the relationship between the parents.
Right.
In other words, if you're in a stressful home, it's hard to have empathy.
Exactly. And we're just there to support that and find the strengths of the parents to support and come underneath that those strengths and really help those parents to find the ways to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's a good point, to find the parents' strengths.
Yes.
That is a good point, is of sometimes as an outside person coming in, that really helps to be able to say that, this is your strength. This is what you can work on. Cool.
Exactly.
All right.
The next E stands for expression. So looking at baby, making faces at baby, and then seeing if baby's making faces back. So do you stick your tongue out at the baby and the baby sticks their tongue back out at you? Those faces, teaching baby how to make those faces, because that's just a learning, growing, developing part of baby's life. That's how babies learn. And are they able to mimic mom or dad or grandma? How does that work with baby? And when they're older, are they expressing to each other that love? What does that look like? What do those faces look like? Those expressions.
I can just see myself sitting there with my little grandchild, sticking my tongue out at them and having them stick the tongue out back.
Right.
Actually, that is very interesting, because facial cues are a very important part of life and a very important of communication. I mean, when you go up to someone, the first thing you look at is whether they're smiling at you,
Right.
or whether they're frowning at you. And I'm sure children pick that up right away also.
They do.
They do.
Yes.
And it's also a part of cues.
Mm-hmm. It is. These are all related back to each other. Sometimes it's hard to distinguish what's going on, and you can write all of these things between each other.
And even up to 5 years of age, which is expression and stuff is important. And I try to tell, at least I did along the way, that children live in a black and white world. They live in a right and wrong. They live in this, I do this and mom does this, or I do this and dad does this. And they quickly learn that mom and dad, however they express themselves, is how their parents are going to express themselves. And parents are different.
Exactly.
Parents are very, very different.
Exactly.
Wonderful. And so this is a good start. So let's go on to the R.
The R stands for reciprocity. Are the baby and the parents, do they have a rhythm? Do they have a synchronicity to them? Are they in sync with each other?
Okay.
How does that work? Are they, if mom, it's kind of like expression. If mom is doing something, is baby doing it back with each other?
So if I do something as a parent, I'm expecting a certain response from my child.
Exactly.
And that's the reciprocal response is, if I tell you that you need to pick up your toys, the reciprocal response is you pick up your toys.
Exactly.
And
if baby doesn't pick up the toys, what is the response of the parent to the baby?
Oh, that's a good point.
So how does that work? What does that rhythm look like?
I think the reciprocity is an important issue when you think about the terrible twos.
Yeah, absolutely.
It isn't named the terrible twos for nothing.
Right.
And that is a part of reciprocity because the child is trying to begin to exert their will into the situation.
Yes. Yes.
And so a real big issue. Seems like it could be a tough problem for both parents and support services to work through.
Yes, it is, and sometimes hard to identify.
And so I know that tons and tons of books are written about temper tantrums and potty training in children because there's a reciprocity involved with those particular developmental tasks.
Yes, and then that also relates back to cues. What cues is your baby giving you that they're ready to be toilet trained? And then what is the reciprocity from toilet training? Once they're giving you those cues, how do you react to that? And then what rhythm does the baby fall into?
And I think that's a really good point about the cues, about potty training. It's impressive that what many parents try to do is potty train their children before they're ready, because it used to be that you couldn't go to preschool until your child was potty trained.
Right.
And the cue that your child is ready to potty train is frequently not there.
Right.
Because, I try to tell parents that there's no 15-year-olds around that aren't potty trained.
Right.
And the reason for that is because every child reaches an age where the cue is change my diaper.
Yes.
I don't like the sensation of poop or pee in my diaper. And that's the cue that you would perhaps tell a parent to begin to say, this is the time to potty train, rather than you're 2 years old and I need to send you to preschool or to a sitter, and they're demanding that you be potty trained at that point.
Right.
And of course, that's an inappropriate expectation, part of reciprocity, and all the other things you're trying to teach parents.
Right.
Perfect.
Exactly.
You got the pediatrician here, so you get some back comments, because there's a lot of experience with exactly the frustrations that your program is dealing with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the frustration of parents, and how do we support them in that?
without getting angry at your child.
Exactly.
Because it's all a learning experience, and it's got to be done with empathy.
Yes. So it all leads back in the cheers to each other.
I think empathy with potty training, empathy with picky eating, empathy with sleep problems. I mean, all of those things occur in young childhood that parents typically do not have support systems for, yes, except grandparents telling them how it should be done.
Right. And it's a totally different world.
and every child's an individual, and that's nice that you have those skills to be able to sit one-on-one in the home situation with the parents. Okay, so let's go on to smiles.
One more, yes. S stands for smiles. And smiles, how is the baby smiling at mom and the mom smiling back, or dad smiling back? Is mom or dad initiating smile and baby smiling back at them? Because that's really a sign of good mental health. Good mental health in the child, good mental health in the parents. Because we want to make sure, that's another thing we screen for is postpartum depression. We want to make sure that mom is taking care of baby and that mom is feeling good and that baby and mom are smiling at each other and having a good time together, and that everybody's feeling good.
Well, I know that smiling is an important part of life, as we talked, yes, about early. It all is related to how you're interacting with your child.
Yes.
And it's the total picture.
Absolutely.
How do you how do you deal with parents' frustrations in some of these aspects? For example, coming with picky eating in childhood, a big problem.
And sometimes parents get really frustrated with their child. Sometimes they can have a really difficult child that demands more attention, and sometimes they can have maybe what they deem an easy child that doesn't demand as much attention, but that child needs just as much attention as the child that they deem more difficult. And so how do you give each child the attention that they need and smile at each child, even if the child is more difficult and needs maybe a little bit more discipline to go on their way?
And one of the big stressors frequently is if you have a first child that's a, quote, easy child in, right, your terminology, and you have a second child that's not so easy, that can sometimes lead to frustrations.
It can.
And at least along the way, I've tried to tell parents that if you have a brother or a sister, are you identical? And right, the answer is no.
No way.
No way. And so that's some way that you can go back to your cuddling and your empathy and an understanding about normal early childhood development. Because the big problems of early that parents deal with in childhood, potty training, feeding, sleeping are the big problems that parents deal with, at least. And your program of Cheers probably, if you can sit down with parents and talk to that, probably is incredibly helpful for that. And I would ask you the consequences maybe of not coming to grips with some of this stuff.
Well,
I know we didn't talk about that question earlier, but that is exactly why your program exists, is the consequences, right, of maybe not coming to grips with all these early childhood issues.
Right. Well, I think the consequences of not coming to grips with this can be devastating.
Absolutely.
And it can lead to behavior problems in school. It can lead to behavior problems later in life. It can lead to not following the rules, or thinking the rules don't apply to you, or not being able to set boundaries for yourself, not being able to just live within society's rules if you aren't able to set boundaries and give that love and attention when they're little.
I think that love and attention is the exact word, because it's important that parents establish good relationships with their children early in life, and perhaps dealing with some of these stressors in an appropriate manner that leaves their child end up feeling comfortable is really one of the hallmarks of the program that you do.
Right.
And do that. So I want to finish here in the last few minutes that we have and talk about some of the outcomes. I noticed that you gave some outcomes, and I thought that they were pretty good. You serve this program serves a lot of families in Arizona.
It does. It serves over 4,000 families in the state of Arizona every year. It's some of the outcomes that are really important. The assessment that we do is a 0 to 100 point assessment. And if you score a 25 on this assessment, which is really easy to do, a 25 point assessment, that increases your risk for abusing and neglecting your child.
And I think that's important. And we're almost out of time here. So I think it's important that 96% of your families had no child abuse.
No child abuse.
Isn't that exactly what you're trying to do?
And that's exactly what we're trying to prevent. And 27% of mothers were not working when they had their child, of mothers in our program. And a year later, 47% of mothers were working.
And that goes back to what you said, the referral earlier on, related to referring them to vocational rehab services, right, or vocational training services, so
exactly.
Not rehab.
And 92% of children are being vaccinated who are in our program, whereas the state and national average is 69%.
You know, it's interesting that 92%, the threshold for protecting a community is 95%, and your program gets at 92%, which is really good. And the other issue is, even though they say 69% on that statewide average is average, it probably is a little bit lower up here in the mountains. I'm going to say we're going to have to cut you off because we're out of time, and I thank you very much for describing your program up here. And it really is important that parents understand that early childhood bonding, recognizing your child, and I cannot stress empathy strong enough, is an important part of early childhood development and establishing good relationships with your parents and your peers later in life. And Dyan, I will thank you very much for coming today and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.